Joining us now, as advertised on line number 10, is the Tory member for Hibernia, Harbour Grace, the Minister of Natural Resources, the Government House Leader, Jerome Kennedy. Minister Kennedy, you're on the air.
Good afternoon, Paddy. How you doing?
Top shelf today, sir. How'd you make out in the tiddly competition?
I lost, unfortunately. One of my brothers defected, formed his own team, and won.
Well, and as I saw you refer to it on Twitter, there's some dirt afoot. That
was definitely. I suspected that it was going to happen, and it came true. So in any event, him and I haven't talked since.
Don't let that percolate any further, Jerome. Do yourself a favor.
Actually, it was a great bit of fun, Paddy. We had a laugh, and it was interesting that all of us experienced tiddly players thought we would win, and my brother David and his team were all new players, and they won. So good for him.
Do I want to ask either one of you what tiddly is?
It's him.
Hello, Jerome. Tell me what tiddly is. Have I been away too long to know what tiddly is?
It's a game that appears to have come from either the Irish or the English, involving a long stick, a small stick, and two bricks. And so I guess growing up in Carabinier, there was lots of kids, and if we didn't have a ball, we played with the sticks and the rocks.
So like the Muskrat Falls debate, basically.
No, there's no sticks yet, but there's lots of rocks being thrown.
Oh my God! And there's sticks coming, Jerome.
Sticks still come.
Okay, one of the real confusing issues for a lot of people, and it is sort of the basis for a lot of the arguments opposed to Muskrat Falls, is why not wait till 2041? There's a website devoted to it. Many of the opponents are hanging their hat on that particular issue of why not wait. First, I think it's be important for my understanding and for the bulk of the listeners, I would suggest, is what exactly happens in 2041 at the expiration of the contract.
Yeah, now when I was the Minister of Justice, that's when I first started and reading in great detail in terms of the various actions that had taken place over the years and trying to understand the history of it all. And there was always, and I too labored under this illusion that in 2041 we would have this great source of free power. But as I continued to read, it's not quite that simple. What happens in 2041 is that the power contract ends. At that point, however, the Newfoundland Labrador Hydro, or the province, are 65% owners of CFLCO, which runs Muskrat Falls, and Hydro-Quebec still owns 34%. So essentially what will happen is, like any corporation, they will have to determine how they're going to proceed. CFLCO will certainly, or the province will certainly have much more control over the private operations, being a majority shareholder, but the power will have to be sold. So whatever that price may be 30 years from now, one can only hazard to guess. But essentially, there's no guarantee that there will be cheap power in 2041.
So is that the argument opposed to relying on 2041, and that date is that it has to be sold? Because for a lot of people, me included, if there is a reasonable power option between now and then that could satisfy our needs, and then 2041 could just complement the rest of the need, then why is it not a good option?
Oh, we've looked at this, Patty. These issues have been raised. I mean, all of the issues that have been raised by the critics over the last number of months, we've examined them, and we will be putting out information as we move closer to the debate. But the bigger issue at this stage, in 2041, is almost 30 years from now, we need power between 2015 2020. So the question becomes, what do you do between now and then? We've had significant and are experiencing significant growth in the province, both from a residential and commercial aspect, and also from the industrial aspect. So what we're seeing here is a need for power that has to be satisfied in the near future, and we will also be providing more detailed information on that. But to give you an example, we've averaged 2,500 housing starts a year since 2002. There's 17,000 new ratepayers since 2005. You look around at all of the houses and the commercial developments that are going up. You look at Valley Inco coming on, needing 80 megawatts of power, and I haven't even talked about Labrador Mining. So the 2041 option, despite its problems in terms of the legal issues, I guess, the question becomes, how do we get to 2041? Because there's no way that Holyrood can continue till that time frame. It's simply a antiquated facility, and reading in great detail in terms of the various actions that had taken place over the years, and trying to understand the history of it all. And there was always, and I too labored under this illusion that in 2041 we would have this great source of free power. But as I continue to read, it's not quite that simple. What happens in 2041 is that the power contract ends. At that point, however, the Newfoundland Labrador Hydro, or the province, are 65% owners of CFLCO, which runs Muskrat Falls, and Hydro-Quebec still owns 34%. So essentially what will happen is, like any corporation, they will have to determine how they're going to proceed. CFLCO will certainly, or the province will certainly have much more control over the private operations, being a majority shareholder, but the power will have to be sold. So whatever that price may be 30 years from now, one can only hazard to guess. But essentially, there's no guarantee that there will be there will be cheap power in 2041.
So is that the argument opposed to relying on 2041? And that date is that it has to be sold? Because for a lot of people, me included, if there is a reasonable power option between now and then that could satisfy our needs, and then 2041 could just complement the rest of the need, then why is it not a good option?
Oh, we've looked at this, Patty. These issues have been raised. I mean, all of the issues that have been raised by the critics over the last number of months, we've examined them, and we will be putting out information as we move closer to the debate. But the bigger issue at this stage, in 2041, it's almost 30 years from now, we need power between 2015 2020. So the question becomes, what do you do between now and then? We've had significant and they're experiencing significant growth in the province, both from a residential and commercial aspect, and also from the industrial aspect. So what we're seeing here is a need for power that has to be satisfied in the near future, and we will also be providing more detailed information on that. But to give you an example, we've averaged 2,500 housing starts a year since 2002. There's 17,000 new ratepayers since 2005. You look around at all of the houses and the commercial developments that are going up. You look at Valley Inco coming on, needing 80 megawatts of power, and I haven't even talked about Labrador Mining. So the 2041 option, despite its problems in terms of the legal issues, I guess, the question becomes, how do we get to 2041? Because there's no way that Holyrood can continue till that time frame. It's simply a antiquated facility which we can't provide the power without signed agreements. So in this information, when we release it, you'll see that there could be anywhere from 400 to 1,000 megawatts of power required by 2020. But we can't develop Gull Island on the basis that people might sign contracts. So what we're looking at here is the people who've signed on the dotted line. And we have currently 80 megawatts of power available from the recall block, which we will put up for grabs. And so we will continue then to work with the mining companies. You know, there's been criticism lately, Patty, that, well, this mining development is all a new scheme or something we've come up with. But the Premier, I think, was last May, was talking about the recall of power for mining developments. I think that's always been out there. What's happened in the last year or so, or at least since I became the minister, the mining developments have certainly moved further ahead. The price of iron ore in China is still at $100 a ton, which makes it very economically viable for these companies to proceed. So, in fact, I go back to January when I did the Muskrat Falls in 25 tweets. I talked about Labrador mining developments then. So the question of whether there'll be enough power is dependent upon whether or not what companies sign. But to give you an example, we've agreed to provide 170 megawatts to Nova Scotia. That 170 megawatts can be developed from small hydro and wind on the island because we have the link. So there's different things that we can do here as we move towards a decision on Muskrat Falls. But there will be all of this information, Patty, as I told you in the past, will be put out in the public, and prior to the debate, there will be reports on wind and natural gas file, the Decision Gate 3 numbers, and the MHA report, and the kinds of things we're talking about here today will all be provided in much more detail.
Jerome, it's interesting looking at some of the criticism that's out there, and you pay attention to that all the time. I know it's important to listen to a diversity of voices, but there seems to be a link that some of the critics, and some of them look to be people who in past eras worked on the Upper Churchill deal and it didn't happen for them, but they're trying to link Upper Churchill or Lower Churchill to Upper Churchill. So the comparison being that if we don't handle Lower Churchill the right way, which is a fair point to make, it could be like Upper Churchill. But is Lower Churchill more like Hibernia?
Yeah, I'm wondering, and I don't remember as much in terms of the Hibernia debate, but what I've been told is that Hibernia initially was looked upon as a make-work project, and there were critics of the project. Hibernia, I think initially at $12 a barrel, people went, oh my God, how can we develop Hibernia at that? And I think it was estimated to be about 600,000 barrels of oil. What Hibernia has done, because people took a chance, whether it was politicians, the provincial and federal governments, or the companies, because they took a chance, Hibernia is estimated to produce 1.3 billion barrels of oil. In fact, the federal government continues to have an 8.5% equity stake in Hibernia, which we've offered to buy back, but they won't sell it. So when you're looking at mega projects, you always have to look to the future. You have to look to, sometimes you have to take a chance, but there's no certainty in projects like this. I think at this stage, we have to also say to the people of our province that we will no longer be dependent on Quebec. We've been held hostage by them for 40 years. Every premier and government has tried to develop some aspects of Lower Churchill to no avail. And so what the Muskrat Falls does, it allows us to connect to the mainland grid, gives us an opportunity to export and bring power in if we have reliability issues, but also says to Quebec that we are not waiting anymore for you to be fair, because history has shown us that won't happen.
Minister Kennedy, we have to stay with our commercial schedule. Can you hang tough? I have a couple more questions right after the break.
Yep.
Okay, we're going to do exactly that. The minister is going to hang tough. We appreciate that. And when we come back, we'll continue the conversation with Minister Jerome Kennedy. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. I apologize to Chess Crosby for stepping on his advertisement. We appreciate his support. Let's go back to line number 10 with the Minister of Natural Resources, Jerome Kennedy. Minister Kennedy, thanks for sticking with us. One of the points that people point to regarding how precarious and how risky the deal may be is with the mayor's contract and their proposed out inside of 3 years. How does that work? How can it get triggered? And do you understand why people point to that as a reason for concern?
Well, actually, Patty, that's totally inaccurate. What happened was that when the term sheet was signed November 2010, there was 3 years to reach an agreement. What's happened is that once the decision is sanctioned, it's sanctioned. There's no going back. So in that time frame, if Emera backed out, the option was left open for Nalcor to develop the link. So there's never been any consideration to any of that. The 3 years runs from the signing of the term sheet till the decision on sanction.
And so if they have no out, you say if they do, Nalcor gets to pick up the pieces, but that's just more cost for the people of the province.
Yeah, but there's no guarantee we'll do that. No, what I'm saying is that they have until 3 years up to the point of sanction. If they don't sanction, that's one thing.
Okay.
3 years after that.
Well, I'm just trying to make a point that many are making and to get the real brass tacks out here. Also, when you and I have talked in the past, and it's the predictability of possible stabilized rates and not the reliance on oil and the global commodity that it is. But then people also say that a predictable stable rate of a 2% increase minimal for every year throughout the life of the project, they don't call that stable, nor do they call it reasonable and affordable. How do you address that concern? And isn't that actually true, that forecast of 2% each year?
Yeah, what's interesting, Patty, is that the rates have gone up actually between 2011 and 2011, rates went up 43%, and people didn't notice it. They went up $58 per month over that period of 2000 to 2011. From 2011 to 2016, they went up $38 a month, or 21%. What Muskrat Falls will do will actually stabilize the rates. It will ensure that it will take us off the volatility of oil, and we will be able to better predict the rates. So in essence, what will happen is that rates will be lower with Muskrat Falls, and they would either be with Holyrood or the isolated option, Holyrood small hydro and wind.
Where do you go in the fall, Jerome? Effectively, the plan, as I understand it, is to come to the public, come to the House of Assembly and discuss it in the fall. How do you get the public on board, or do you think the public's already on board? Because you see in the papers, you see in the blogs, you hear on this program more of the critics appearing. Is there a silent majority out there who supports this?
Yeah, I think there is. Well, I've been out in my district and around the province, and a lot of people are saying get on with it. It's good for our province. But what we have to realize the critics they never get tired and they're very loud. Whether it's from belief in what they do or for whatever reason. I mean, they will continue. It's the same group of people, and I think that they certainly have that right, and we will answer the questions that they put forward, as I'm trying to do today. But what will happen next is we're preparing all of our reports to release to the public, the Decision Gate 3 numbers, we need the MHA review done, the wind and natural gas studies. And by the way, Patty, I don't think you're going to be far off on the natural gas from what you've said in the past. So what we're going to see is we're going to release all this information. We will then set a date for a debate in the House of Assembly.
Do you think there's a thesis in the Globe and Mail today that's being advanced that Canada's in the midst of an identity crisis around energy? Is it part and parcel of it with what we're seeing with Lower Churchill here?
Well, what I find, I've always found amazing about the Upper Churchill is how in a federation, one province has been allowed to block another province from reaching a status of prosperity, and that the federal government not to intervene. So what we're seeing here is a shift in this country where the Prime Minister and the Premier has been criticized time and time again for trying to work with the federal government on this issue, but she's doing a good job on this. She's a former Minister of Natural Resources, and she understands that the importance of not only the loan guarantee, but of nation building. What we're showing the rest of this country is that we can work with other provinces, that we can work with Atlantic Canada. It's just Quebec that we all have difficulty with. So if there's an identity crisis, I think it's less catering to Quebec and a recognition that other provinces have needs and need to be treated fairly.
One of the issues inside the cell has always been and always refers back to the message and the way that government has rolled it out, whether it be a shag, Quebec, and then on it goes through residential need, commercial needs on the island, what option is the best one for the people of the province, Labrador mines, and on it goes. You know the deal. But then one of the things people are pointing to as to what they say is disingenuous about the government's approach is that we're going to have a debate on a so-called free vote. But people say that is all simply window dressing. How can government ever turn its back on the spending that it's already incurred in preparation for Muskrat Falls, and that this debate will be nothing more than political grandstanding in the House? Is there still a legitimate option? And how do you convince folks that there is still the courage and the foresight and the willingness to look at the data to make a conscientious decision at the debate time and at the vote, as opposed to the jig's already up, Muskrat's a go?
See, this is part, again, Patty, the difficulty that a government we find ourselves in. It's like we're using MHI, and last week we're criticized for using MHI because of what's going on in Manitoba. Well, we used them because the PUB had hired them. We were criticized for not having a debate. And now we've set the debate down. Everyone will have their opportunity to speak. And by the way, what we're looking at doing here, because I know there's been some discussion of this, is following the template of not only the Voisey's Bay debate, but the FPI debate. Both of them were special debates where there was a resolution was debated over a 3-day period, that it went on for, there was a question period restricted to the issue, and every member, I think, in those debates was given the opportunity to speak. So we're looking at following that same template for both of those. At the end of the day, members will have the opportunity to speak. But as for what we do as a government, we can't seem to win in terms of if we don't have a debate, we're criticized. Now we're going to have the debate. All I can tell you is that based on what I'm seeing today, and a lot of the numbers and reports and everything, we don't have our final numbers, but everything I'm seeing today convinces me that Muskrat Falls is the right way to go. Now, we got to have all of the information in, but I was criticized earlier the year, Patty, for being wishy-washy because I said, well, I'm not sure that I'm not married to the deal. So it's very difficult for us to position that's accepted by everyone. The critics will never accept, and you know who I'm talking about, Patty, they will never accept where we're going. There's a real question as to whether or not the opposition parties will be interested in debate or stifling debate. So at some point the NDP have to make a decision. I listened time and time again to them saying, well, we haven't made up our mind, we don't know. The Liberals, I've expressed my opinion in the past. I think that the Liberal members in Labrador will have no choice but to come on board. So really what we're trying to do is provide as much information to the public as possible, allow for that opportunity for debate, and allow for people to vote. Now, I don't know what else can be expected. If anyone expects I'm going to get on here today and say Muskrat Falls is not a good deal, well, no, I'm not doing that.
Jerome, when can we expect this release of information, debate, and vote?
Yeah, well, what we're doing is we're getting the Decision Gate 3 numbers finalized. The federal loan guarantee is being finalized. We have to have the MHI review done. The reports on wind prepared. The reports on natural gas have to be finalized. And then the other papers that we're working on will all be released prior to the debate. So I think right now we're certainly into late September, early to mid-October at the earliest for the debate.
We certainly appreciate your time. There's always going to be questions that are posed by people on the fence, people who are opposed, and those who philosophically are supportive of the deal, but still everyone with this amount of money on the table and this sort of venture and undertaking on behalf of the province and Alcor, all the questions are legit, and we're glad you take the time to answer them here on the program.
Yeah, and one last point, Patty, and it's taken me a while sometimes to come to this, but there's no such thing as someone raising a stupid question or a stupid point. If they have an issue, there's a right to raise it, and it gives us an opportunity to discuss it, because this did not take place with the Upper Churchill in 1969. So the question is, how long does it go on for? But we welcome the questions, and we'll do the best. I'll do the best I can to answer them. Whether it'll satisfy people, that's another issue.
We appreciate your time.
Thank you very much. See you, Patty. See you, Tim.
See you, Jerome. Thank you.
Jerome Kennedy, the Minister of Natural Resources, Government House Leader. You heard what he had to say, folks. This is Muskrat Falls, as I've said for a long time here in the program, has become a win and lose. It's not about whether or not this is the right thing to do for some folks. It's not whether it's a good business deal. This has become politicized and all about winning and losing and trying to be the loudest voice on either side of the coin. Whatever you want to say about it, you know the deal. You're always welcome to call the program. Voice your opposition to it. Tell us why you may indeed support it. And, of course, anything and everything is a good question and a worthy comment. Make sure you give us a call. We're taking a break, and then we're coming back.